Do you know the feeling of remembering nothing from books you read weeks or months ago? It sucks! Most people are in this boat if they even read. Luckily, the solution I have found comes in the mystical art of highlighting. Catchy, I know. In this video, I will take you through the SQ3R Framework for reading and the personal tips I use for highlighting and annotating that have been a game changer in my reading flow. The SQ3R Framework. The SQ3R is a systematic method designed for studying a textbook developed by Francis P. Robinson, a psychologist from Ohio State University. The SQ3R is an effective reading system many students have successfully used. It operates on a series of 5 steps. Survey. Glance over the headings in the chapter to see the few big points that will be developed. If the book has one, read the final summary. Question. Turn the first heading into a question. Your purpose while reading the chapter is to answer that question. Read. Read to answer that question. This is not a passive plotting, but an active search for the answer. Recite. Having read a section, look away from the book and try to recite the answers to the question in your own words. If you can't do this, glance over the section again. Repeat these 4 steps for each section. Review. When the entire section is read, look over it to get a bird's eye view of the lesson as a whole. Under each heading, try and recite the major subpoints. Even with this framework, how you highlight or annotate will change depending on your purpose for a reading session. This is why it's important to find out what reason you're reading before you begin highlighting or annotating. Let's go over some of the most common ones. Reading to inform. If you're reading to inform, you don't need to spend time highlighting or annotating text. You're only trying to get a broad picture. You aren't ever going to delve deep into the text. Reading to inspect. Similarly, in the case of inspectional reading, you don't have to spend time highlighting or annotating, as you're only trying to decide if the book is worth a deeper reading in the first place. Reading for fun. A large portion of reading is reading to entertain. Most of my sci-fi, fiction, fantasy, and other reading falls into this category. In this case, it's up to you if you highlight or take notes. Unless you're a book reviewer, I see no reason to take extensive notes for this kind of reading. Reading to understand. This is the category I spend most of my time reading. Generally, if I'm reading a nonfiction book, I want to delve deep into a topic I'm interested in. This doesn't mean you can't read nonfiction books to entertain, but it's not as common. This is where the true power of highlighting combined with annotating comes in. Many things fall into this category. Reading for class, reading for nonfiction to learn more about a topic, reading for a discussion later on, reading to create. This is the ultimate level of comprehension and understanding. Creating something out of your reading is the best way to engage with it on the deepest level. Because I create so much content online on my blogging website, email newsletter, YouTube channel, and now courses, I often will read something I know I want to create something out of in the future. At this level, you still highlight and annotate like while reading to understand. Most of the time when I read, I'm reading because it interests me. It might be created into something later down the line, and it might not. If I know I'll create something out of it, I don't want to give readers a false idea of what the book is like. I want to paint a comprehensive picture. This means I'll sometimes highlight things that I already know. So when I create something out of it later, I won't forget to explain the concept to my readers. Reading to create is especially useful for creating a research paper. Your highlights and annotations will provide incredible insight into the main parts of a source for your paper. In addition, your annotations can be used to develop topic questions. Whew, that was a lengthy exposition, but important. We can finally get into some principal tips for highlighting and annotating. Principal tips for highlighting. Choosing what to highlight is quite simple. Highlight what interests you. Anything you come across that makes you go, whoa, should be immediately highlighted. Generally, this means I don't highlight things I already know from other books if they get mentioned again. They don't whoa me anymore. Also, if I hear Pavlov's dogs referred one more time in a psychology book, I'm gonna take my peanut butter and forget I said that. I like to highlight exciting ideas or insights in yellow, studies in pink, and anecdotes in blue. This makes it easier to tell what something is later down the line. We'll discuss later how to use a note-taking system to skyrocket your reading insights, but for now, note that these colored highlights will help you later on. For 80% of your reading, Highlighting in this way works wonderfully. This process is a self-behavior loop, as your future self will reflect on the things your reading self finds interesting when coming back to your highlights later on. If your future self isn't interested in your highlights, you can take that into account the next time you go to read something. Over time, you will understand what parts of a text interest you and what to save later on. Don't worry if you don't get it perfect the first few times. Principal tips for annotations. Annotating combined with highlighting changes the reading game. If you have a consistent reading habit, you're already in the top 99% of the people in the world. If you have this alongside an active reading protocol through annotating and highlighting, you are in the top 99.999% of people in the world. Like with highlighting, there's a lot of personal preference in how you annotate. Here are some guidelines I follow while annotating you might consider implementing into your own reading routine. Answer the questions from How to Read and the SQ3R Framework. Use the questions from the SQ3R Framework by answering them with your annotations. Summarize large sections. There are many times when I read a section by an author and think, wow, they could have said that way more concisely. When this happens, I highlight the entire series of paragraphs and summarize it in my own words. My future self thanks me when I don't have to read the entire thing over again for understanding down the line. Recontextualize the information. Recontextualize the information if you need to. Sometimes highlights make no sense if read in isolation. This is because they've been taken out of the context in the specific chapter and subheadings of the book. When these highlights pop up in Readwise later on, you will bash your past self for not being more mindful. It's your past self's job to add the necessary background information so your future self will understand it. Describe the context the highlight is embedded in a couple of sentences through an annotation. Define a term your future self won't know. Highlight to indicate the structure of a book. At any reading level, whether it be a chapter, paragraph, or entire book, there are usually main points followed by supporting evidence and a conclusion. One method of highlighting could be to highlight the main points one type of color and supporting evidence with another color. This would be especially helpful if you're doing textual analysis or reviewing an essay. There are no right ways to highlight and annotate, only the ways that work for you. Connect to relevant information. One of the main ways our brain stores things in long-term memory is through the process of elaboration. Elaboration is the art of connecting past knowledge with things you're learning right now. If you read a passage and it relates to something you have already learned, one option would be to mention it in your annotation. If you ever create a book summary on it, this will make it easier for your writing self to find outside information to bring in as a personal touch. Connect to a personal anecdote. Write down a story of your own life that reflects the idea talked about in the highlighted passage. Telling stories relevant to the books you are reading is a great conversation topic. It's easier to bring up those stories if you write them down for reference later on. In addition, if you're an avid writer and like creating book summaries, this will make it easier for your writing self later on to find stories to include in the essay. Make your future self laugh. Write down something funny. Maybe the passage reminded you of something stupid you did as a kid. It will be gold later on when you come across the annotation again. Some of my greatest laughs have been from my past self interacting with my future self. I have literally fallen on the floor crying for entire minutes after reading comments from my past self. Important Readwise CS. Readwise has some amazing CS features in the app you can use while annotating. For anyone not taking computer science, this is a technological speak for code which will cause different effects when the highlights get sent to Readwise. If you don't know what Readwise is, check out my video on the topic. Readwise themselves has released many articles on the best code to use while annotating. They allow you to do some cool things like combine highlights. You can also make it so your highlights pop up under the section, chapter, and subheading indicated with some unique code. You can check out some articles on how to do this in the description. I recommend reading all of the Readwise blog posts. They're all insightful and will broaden your perspective on the possibilities Readwise opens up for you while reading. Don't be a perfectionist. Highlighting and annotating effectively is not an easy task. It shouldn't be. Active reading is called that for a reason. But reading in this way will make you get more out of your books than you could ever imagine. To make the learning process more smooth, don't be a perfectionist. Perfectionism is one of the worst qualities you can have. It keeps too many from pursuing their dreams because they get caught up in tiny details. Give yourself some slack. Start slow. Soon enough, highlighting and annotating will come as naturally to you as breathing. Be sure to check out my video describing the different levels of creating a book summary. This will help you use these highlights and annotations to create something. As always, have a fantastic day and bye-bye.